Hello and welcome to That's So Craven, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. This is Dave and this is After Dark. And tonight we're going to be giving our final thoughts on Fulham versus Arsenal on Saturday. We're going to be looking forward to this weekend's game at St James's Park against Newcastle United. We'll be touching on Marco Silva and all the Marco Silva drama this week. And we've got a load of questions in our Discord group, which we will be answering as the show goes on. Thanks to everyone who's joining us tonight. Please send in your questions and comments. We'll do our best to answer those. And I'm not alone tonight. I do have someone joining me. It's none other than Mike the Traveller, which is a nickname that that Michael's dad and I are trying to really get stuck. Hope sticks because we think it's hilarious. And Mike, despite only having one leg, you're going to be limping your ass up those St James's Park steps on Saturday, aren't you?
Well, you say that. They do have a lift, so I will probably be making use. That's an elevator for our American listeners. But yes, I think I will be able to get myself up to the top tier of St James's Park on Saturday.
Okay. It'd be quite amusing if the lift was out of order for the day.
It would be annoying because I think last time I went there, I actually counted how many steps it was up to the top. I've since forgotten how many steps it was, but it was a good 100 and something. So, that won't be so great on crutches if I have to take that route.
No. Well, now that Skibby knows there's a lift, I think he might be joining you. He's going up on Saturday as well. So
the lift's not big enough for me and Skibby, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. Right, shall we get started? Oh, by the way, what do you think of my title for the pod? Fulham Haway Ole Ole ? Question mark.
I mean, if we win, it'll probably stick as a chant. But it's optimistic, I'd say. But yeah, fair enough.
Well, I was quite pleased with myself with that one. But
it's one of your more creative ones, that's for sure.
Thank you. Right, let's get stuck into Fulham versus Arsenal. Obviously, the guys, That's So Craven Aussie OGs did the podcast on Monday, I think it was, and did a fantastic job at really getting stuck into this game. Brilliant review. If you haven't already heard it, go back and have a listen. I do enjoy when it's the Aussie OGs are all on together. It's like proper old school. Love it. But yeah, we haven't spoke about it, Mike, really in much detail. Well, me and you have, but we haven't spoke about it live on air. So I've been going into this one, Mike. I was really nervous. All of the injuries, obviously the form, at least on paper, and obviously the way Arsenal have been playing this season. I thought it was going to be a hammer in. I thought we were going to get really humbled. That's not quite how the game panned out, was it?
No, and I mean, I was in the same boat as you. Even though Arsenal don't tend to really blitz teams, having then watched them on Tuesday night absolutely dismantle Atletico Madrid, it kind of makes me feel more pleased in hindsight with our performance, even though we didn't really do much to threaten at all. We had our moments, but you kind of just felt like once they got in front, that was probably the end of it. But yeah, they're in a really good run of form at the moment. They don't concede chances, let alone goals. So it was always going to be an uphill battle, even if we had everyone to choose from. The fact that we are slap bang in the middle of a pretty big injury crisis at the moment meant that we were going to have to get a lot of luck and a lot of things go our way that just don't really tend to when we play some of the bigger sides. Not that there was any real controversy in this game. I thought that the penalty sort of being overturned was a bit of a surprise because those are the ones that a friend of mine actually pointed out that the big teams tend to get those decisions on pitch and then VAR don't tend to intervene, whereas the other way round, you don't tend to get them on pitch. But So I was quite surprised that it was overturned just because of the fact that it's us and we don't seem to get the rub of the green very much. But not that it made a massive difference. We didn't really look like scoring much in the second half. Played pretty well in the first half, and just I think it's one of those ones that even though it's 3 defeats on the bounce, I'm not that disappointed by it. It's one that you just put away and move on to the next one, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised at how we performed and how, I guess it was not so much about the attacking play. It's more how we kind of stopped Arsenal from, breaking us open and creating chances. And given that we had a lot of injuries, particularly at the back, obviously not helped by Anderson going off injured, we pretty much had our second choice back four on the pitch. And I thought they all did really, really well. I think that is probably our strongest area in our squad is the defence. I just think that our backup is more than capable, where there's other parts of the pitch where I think, particularly in midfield, where I don't think we've got that same depth. And I think we struggle when there's one or two out. But it's interesting you mentioned that penalty because they were talking about that on Monday's pod. And, Jack was kind of, his opinion was that that's what VAR is for, and it did a great job, which, and thankfully Elton held him to account a bit, which I was pleased about because I have to say, I was surprised. It was firstly that they looked at it because the ref was looking right at this when it happened. I'm not sure it was something that he missed or a clear and obvious error. I guess the argument is, well, did he see that Kevin got the ball, I suppose? And that's what they were looking at. Actually, if you look at it, there's also an element where he does actually go through Saka a little bit to get the ball. He takes his knee out. And I just wondered, is this the kind of thing, it took 6 minutes for that to happen. 6 minutes we had to wait for them to make a decision there. And I just think, is that really the kind of thing VAR is supposed to be getting involved in? It just drives me mad. It's just every week there's something. And I know this is one that went for us, but it's just another example of something I just don't think they should be getting involved in.
Yeah, I think so. Having watched some of the replays back, there is an angle which, when you look at it from where the ref is, it appears that at the very moment that Kevin makes the challenge, Smith Rowe kind of runs across the referee's sight line, which would suggest why he was maybe unsighted on the fact that Kevin plays the ball. But then surely if somebody's in your way, you can't give the decision because you haven't seen it. So I'm a bit baffled by the whole process, to be honest. But I take your point on VAR. I kind of think that it feels like it's a necessary evil just because there are howlers on field that do need to be overturned, but it's still too busy for my liking. It needs to stay out of it. I talk about it like it's a computer. It's a human being behind them, watching on a TV screen like a lot of our supporters are as well. So it doesn't really affect the result here. So it's kind of a moot point for this one. But yeah, the wider sort of consensus, it still seems to be that it's quite a subjective decision, this one that's actually gone in our favour for once. But the bigger point about it, I think we sort of touched on after the game, was that Kevin doesn't probably need to lunge in there. And that's something that we've seen from him a little bit in the early sort of days. And you just kind of feel like he's going to need to tone down that aggression, stroke enthusiasm, and maybe channel it in a more productive way, because you can just see something like that going really badly for us if he continues to lunge in. So I'm hoping that's maybe a lesson learned for his sake, but we'll see.
Well, you say that, but I remember the Cambridge game when he started, and I remember in that game he lunged into a tackle on the fullback. At the time, I was like, head in hands, like that looks like it could be, especially in the Premier League away from home. I think the referee would have had the decision to make there. Fortunately, it was a home game in the cup, and actually it maybe looked a little bit worse than real. Yeah, no VAR. Yeah, and I think you're right. I've seen him lunge in a few times, and I think he just backs himself to get the ball. And I think he backs himself as a defender. I think when everyone was profiling him when he just signed for us, that was something that came out. He's not just a luxury winger. He's actually someone who works hard, gets back, and likes to get stuck in. But I'm with you a little bit. I've seen a few lunges, and I'm just a little bit nervous, like you are, that he might get caught out with that, and it might be something that he has to learn to tone down a bit.
Yeah, and I think obviously coming from the Brazilian league where they generally tend to kick the crap out of each other quite a lot, I think he's probably had to learn to stick up for himself, and it's almost a bit stick one on someone before someone sticks one on you. He might just need to kind of channel that a bit better. But yeah, let's hope that that's the lesson learned there, as in you can't go lunging in, even though we got away with it this time.
Yeah, no, and as you said, it turned out I walked away from the game not too disappointed. As I said, my expectation was it was going to be a lot worse. So to go away 1-0, we kept, we were in the game up until the end. And it's hard to say that anyone played particularly poorly, I thought. But everyone put in a real shift, worked really hard. We just maybe didn't have the quality to get the shots on target that we need. And with the players that we've got out at the moment, that was kind of understandable.
Yeah, I think as well, a lot of the credit has to go to Arsenal for how they defend, because in that sort of situation, when you're 1-0 up away from home, teams tend to sink a bit deeper and just invite you on. Arsenal did not do that. They continued to press us right the way up the pitch, right until the sort of, the final minutes. And that just didn't allow us to build any sort of rhythm or momentum to create chances like we normally would. So I kind of feel like it felt like quite a stodgy game for us, because Arsenal, really work hard. You look at their wingers, and they were doubling up with their fullbacks, right to the death. And we've seen that, like, a lot of wingers in the league maybe don't tend to do that so much. Arsenal's do. They work hard all game, and they're really diligent in what they're supposed to do, and that just kind of sets the tone. And even toward the end, like, Gyökeres is still chasing us down when we're trying to play it out from the back, and it just kind of makes life really difficult when you're trying to chase a game in terms of putting moves together to make chances. So I'd say it's a credit to them, and we sort of did the best that we could with the limited resources available to us.
Yeah, no, and I was really pleased with a few of those performances. Cesc, Cuenca, really, really good performances from those guys. I actually thought Sander Berge played quite well, which is the first time I've said that this season. I think he's not quite been at the level that I think we saw when he first broke into the team for some time, but I thought he had a better game. And even Raul Jimenez, who hadn't had much training, to come in and put in a shift like he did. I mean, he was perhaps a little bit deep for my liking as a number 9, but generally, I just thought his work rate was excellent, and I was really pleased he was back in the team, because we'd have really struggled, I think, if we hadn't had him leading the line.
So, and he doesn't play 90 very often, so the fact that he's come back in off the injury and played a full 90 is also bodes well for us, because we're going to need him over the next few weeks if Muniz continues to be out.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, obviously we're talking about all the positives. It is another loss, though. Just wanted to quickly, before we move on, what's your feeling on the start of the season, the first 8 games? Because there's an argument to say on paper, 8 points is, more or less around par, considering the games that we had. Pretty tough away games on paper. All teams that were in the top 10 last year. And the home games, okay, we've lost to Arsenal, but, by 1 goal margin, beat Brentford, beat Leeds, albeit unconvincingly, and a draw against Man United, which, okay, maybe we should have got more out of that game, but on the day, it didn't feel like we deserved a lot more. So I just want to kind of get your feeling, because we're kind of moving down the league. If we weren't to pick up any points on Saturday, it makes that Wolves game really kind of a big game for us. It makes, we'd have to win that, I think, at that point, or alarm bells would start ringing. So I just wanted to get your quick take really on where we're at.
Yeah, I think in terms of the results that we've had, none of them are like shocking. None of them are surprised in the sense of, oh, that was one that we, we're banking on winning, and we've dropped points there. They're all kind of about what you'd expect. I kind of feel like the next run of games that we've got is a really good chance for us to start picking up points, particularly the home fixtures that we've got coming up. I think it's Wolves and Sunderland are the next 2. they're not gimmies, but they're definitely games that we should be looking to win. The away games, Newcastle, it's a tricky one, of course it is, but you kind of feel like that Everton, I think Spurs away at the end of November,
Yeah.
are all potentially games that we could get something in. If we're on it and we've maybe got some of our more established players back and can go there and put in a strong performance, you kind of feel like we can. So I'm not worried at this stage. I think maybe there's an element of the fact that there's no clear bottom three who are terrible and are going down already. So that's maybe leading to
I don't know.
some.
Did you watch West Ham on Monday?
I mean, yes, West Ham are terrible, but they are massive. So let's not write them off just yet. But I think it's the kind of thing where it won't be the kind of season where you don't even need 30 points to stay up, which it has been for the last couple of seasons, which is pretty embarrassing for those teams that went down. But I think the other thing as well that is maybe a bit of a concern is we aren't scoring that many goals.
Yeah.
Whereas in previous seasons, we've kind of started really well and then we've kind of tailed off. It just feels a little bit like this one's a bit different. We've had a bit of a slow start. We know about all of the issues in terms of our transfer window and really late business, which has maybe hampered things. But I'm not worried at this stage. I just think it's, we need to kind of have a stronger November and December to really kind of get us back to a more favourable position, should we say?
Yeah, because there's a question here on on YouTube for Ian ZNZ. And he says, any chances of Fulham getting relegated this season? I'm not worried about that at all at the moment. Maybe that's completely naive, but I just think we've got a good squad. We've had a tough start. The new players haven't been embedded in the side yet. And
yeah.
we still managed to pick up 8 points. I think, as you say, the next few weeks, that conversation could either go up the agenda if we don't pick up any points in the next couple, or it could just fall away because, we get some points on the board and all of a sudden we're looking, healthy mid-table again. I don't feel any concern at the moment. I think we've got enough quality. And I think it might be a bit of this, one of those seasons where we actually do a little bit better this time in the back end, second half of the season. I get that feeling, but what's your view on that?
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think, things can always go wrong and you can have a bad season, but I kind of feel like you look at the depth of our squad, we've got good Premier League level players. It doesn't feel like the kamikaze seasons we had in previous relegations where we had, a shit show of a squad that clearly weren't motivated and half of them were loan players and all that. We don't seem to have those kind of writing on the wall things that you're going down. You can always get dragged into it, but it's not something that I'm concerned about at the moment, that's for sure.
The other thing is, I think we've got a better squad than the teams below us. I think we're better than a lot of those teams below us. Wolves, West Ham, Leeds, Burnley. I think we're a better side.
Yeah.
So I'd back us over the season to get more points than them. So I could be eating my words. You can clip this up at the end of the season when we're all miserable. But at the moment, no, I think I'm not overly concerned about that. But it would be nice to pick up some points in the next few games.
Yeah, I think we just feel a bit more stable than some of the other clubs that are down there as well. So you'd like to think that as long as we can sort of maintain that, then we should be looking up rather than down. But the first thing is to get the points on the board to kind of make sure that doesn't become a problem. So hopefully we can crack on in the next few games to start improving that points tally.
Well, on that note, the next game, Newcastle away. I remember before the Arsenal game, I said, I'd kind of written off the next two. But after the Arsenal performance, I don't know why, but I suddenly just got this kind of feeling that there might be an opportunity here. I think it's because Newcastle have obviously played last night, in which they actually got a really good result. I think they won 3-0 at home to Benfica.
Yeah.
but I know that they would have been, all of the fans, all of the players have been looking at that one, and our game is kind of, I suppose that's been the highlight of their week, is looking forward to the Champions League and making sure they perform in that one. And it is notoriously difficult for teams that are not used to playing Champions League to then turn up in the league, the weekend after. And Mike, you've watched a lot of football this year, particularly since you broke your ankle. The form in the Premier League's not been overly convincing. I mean, they're only a point above us.
Yeah, it's been patchy, but they are a good side. They have got good players, but it's maybe been that distraction of the Champions League that has maybe led to some of their form in the Premier League not being as impressive as it was, say, last season. I was hoping that they were going to have a more difficult game. They beat Benfica quite comfortably. I think they were able to rotate. I think they had both Drellington and Tonali on the bench, and you'd expect them to come back in on Saturday. So it wasn't quite as I was hoping that they would have a really traumatic, sort of ding dong of a 4-3 game that was, really crazy and just emotionally draining as well as physically draining. But I think they kind of got through it as comfortably as you could expect to. So that's maybe sort of, tempered my enthusiasm a little bit. But I feel like we're capable of going to someone like Newcastle and maybe frustrating them and just keeping things tight and not doing anything daft in the first 20 minutes like we did a couple of years ago when Raul decided to do that weird challenge and get sent off. You kind of feel like if we can go up there and just make things difficult, we can either quieten the crowd or maybe get them a bit frustrated, because they're not necessarily the most patient bunch when things aren't going well. Obviously, they're on a bit of a crest of a wave in recent seasons, but you kind of feel like we, as you kind of alluded to, we're not the biggest game in town for them this week. So it might just take a little bit to get them going. And if we can kind of go up there and make life difficult and look to win the game late like we did last year, that might play into our hands. So I'm sort of not confident, but not unconfident, if that makes any sort of sense.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I kind of feel like we'll be in the game. We're not going to turn up and get rolled over. And but at the same time, really tough fixture. They're a good side. They've got lots of good players that can hurt us. So yeah, we
so on
shall
that
see.
note, Mike, what players do they have? That you'll be looking out for as threats. Obviously, they signed the big German lad.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have a stab at his name live on air, but I know it's a long one. It begins with W. I've seen him bang a couple of headers. I've seen him score a flick. He looks like a bit of a handful. Looks like he likes to get in the 6-yard box. He'll be a threat, no doubt.
So I'm looking forward to seeing him live, because I've not seen him sort of in the flesh. His name is Nick Voltemade, not to be confused with the bad guy from Harry Potter. He doesn't look like a footballer. He has echoes of and Fulham fans of a certain vintage will remember Dirk Lehmann, the porn star who used to play up front for us in the late 90s. Yeah. Voltemade's got a bit of Dirk Lehmann about him, at least in terms of how he looks. I think he's a significantly better footballer. He's one of those guys who seems like a bit of a cliched, good touch for a big lad kind of player, but he's not just a lump that they look to kind of bounce it off of. He's quite a cute and intricate sort of player. He seems to have linked up pretty well with the likes of Gordon and Barnes in their sort of early weeks. I think that those kind of players who are quick and direct runners playing off of a forward like him will cause us problems. So that'll be interesting. And he seems to score all kinds of goals as well. Finish at Brighton was really nice last weekend. So let's hope that we can kind of keep him quiet. I think that might influence Marco Silva's thinking as to who he plays at centre-back up against Voltemade. So we'll see.
We'll see. He reminds me of Peter Crouch from what I've seen so far, which is the short cameos I've seen. They've obviously got some good attacking players. Well, Anthony Gordon scored 2 goals last night. He's going to be a threat down that wing. He's obviously rapid. Harvey Barnes and Jacob Murphy always seems to play quite well against us as well. They've got a good midfield. Is the opportunity for us that maybe they don't have the best defence in the league, and that's an opportunity for us? Where's the opportunity for Fulham?
Well, I think so. At the moment, you'd like to think that I think they've been playing Dan Burn at left back, and he's not the quickest Dan Burn. So maybe we can get some joy down that side if we can transition or counter quickly from when Newcastle have the ball. I think that they're the kind of team who they've got real quality in midfield. Guimaraes, Tonali, Joelinton. That's a really strong physical midfield as well as technically good. So I'd kind of feel like if we're going to get anything, we need to, do well in that area of the pitch and hopefully kind of win that battle. So I think if Lukic is available, I would expect him to come straight back in because that will give us probably a better opportunity of not only retaining the ball when we need to, but also just breaking play up. He'll get his customary yellow card, of course he will, but it's the kind of thing where that could be a real key area for us to kind of, get any sort of joy from if we're going to get a result. Malik Chow's the new centre-back. I can see there's comment here. He looks pretty decent. Yeah, he does. I think they might bring Cher back in, though, because they've started Botman and Tiao, so there might be an element of a bit of rotation from that. I think Cher seems to have been their sort of starter in the Premier League, at least. So that's an area that we could maybe look to exploit. And also, I think both Livramento and Hall are injured, so Trippier will probably have to start again. That's possibly something. Maybe late in the game, if we're bringing Kevin off the bench, we could maybe get a bit of joy there. But, Trippier's a bit of a wily old fox, so you would like to think that he doesn't lure Kevin into a random lunge and get sent off or something daft like that. But we'll see. I think, there's areas that we can exploit, but at the same time, I feel like we're going to have to be, really on our game and up for the physical challenge in order to get something.
Yeah, no doubt they've got a pretty strong midfield, and you can't let them get the better of you in there. Let's talk about obviously Fulham and the injuries. We've heard from Marco Silva this afternoon. He's given a bit of an update on I guess where we're at in terms of who's going to be available, and it gives some clues. Of course, he can be a bit coy, and it's not always obvious as to what the position is of players. But he's given some team news, so I'll just read what he said via Jack Kelly's X feed this afternoon. He said, "Some good news, some not so good. Kenny was already involved in the last game. He has had a good week, and will be in contention. Joachim Anderson will be out. Jedi is out. Lukic is in contention." And I think we knew that because we saw clips of him in the videos that Fulham had put out on their socials during the week, that he was back in training. As you say, by the way, side note, he's on 4 yellows. So if he gets one more, he'll miss the next game. So, we'll have to maybe strategically try and figure out what game's best for him to pick up that yellow in.
That would be Wickham on Tuesday.
So then he needs to pick it up on Saturday then.
Yeah, in the 90-something minute, just clean somebody out, but not too badly. So just, maybe take like a tactical yellow, in the...
Do you know what, Mike? I don't think we need to give Sasha advice on how to get a yellow card.
No, probably not. Probably not. He just needs to look at the ref the wrong way at some point and he'll get that yellow card.
I think he's just got that down. He knows what he's doing there. The other news was he said Chukwueze and Mooney's out. I was a bit disappointed on Mooney's because I've seen him in his training gear a few times. I thought he might have been a bit further along, and I was really hoping there'd be a surprise appearance off the bench, but it doesn't look that way. Wilson's out. Apparently he was injured actually last weekend, which you'd never have known. I thought he put in a lot of effort last weekend. A lot of people said this, the better finisher would have scored those chances, but I thought he put in a really good shift. It was much better than the performance he put in against Bournemouth anyway, where he dog shit, basically. So anyway, he's a doubt. The good thing is this year, and people will disagree with this, I know I know that it's a little bit controversial, but I think we've still got a pretty good squad that we're able to manage games like this, even with, the injury list as it is. It's not like we've got a bench full of youth players. It's even with these injuries, we're still going to have people like Kevin and Niasar and Adama and people like that can bring on and change the game. We just spoke about how the second choice defense is, doing really well. And we know Kenny Tete's back and Bassey's on there too. I think we've got enough senior players in this squad that we can still be competitive through this period. And actually, I think a lot of teams around us would they don't have the squad depth that we do. I don't think. I think they'd be, if they had the issues that we've had with injuries. So a team like, Brentford, for example, I think they'd really struggle if they had five or six first teamers out. Where I think we are should be able to manage that with the quality that we have. But as I say, I'll wait for the people to come at me on that one. But it's just my opinion. Mike, how do we line up here? Is Silva going to go back to a back five, or do you think he's going to keep the four?
I think he'll stick with the four. Whether there's changes at centre back, I don't know, because Cuenca didn't do anything to deserve to lose his place, but maybe somebody like Bassey alongside Diop might be a bit more suited to deal with the physical challenge. But yeah, I don't know. I don't see Tete coming back in for Castagna, even though you'd probably fancy Tete to do a better job defensively. I don't think Castagna's done anything wrong to kind of warrant being dropped. And you kind of feel like with a game on Tuesday in the League Cup, he might look to sort of integrate some of the players back in who have been injured lately into that game. So
I'm going to, the only thing I'd say on that is, obviously last time we went away from home to Bournemouth, I think you could argue that Castagna, really got done by Semenyo for that equaliser. When he's going to be now up against Anthony Gordon, who's, in good form, top player. As you say, which you did allude to, I'd much rather Kenny Tete be up against Anthony Gordon than Timmy Castagna, especially, I would just fancy Tete to, do a much better job at keeping him quiet. I think Marco's used Kenny Tete as the third centre-back in the back three a couple of times this season at the early on. And that might also be a possibility. I kind of see what you're saying. I know it's a bit of a meritocracy at Fulham, and it's hard to get once you've got your place in a team. It does feel like Marco's quite hesitant to pull you back out again, and that's probably how he keeps the squad harmony there, because it's a fair system. But actually, I would much rather see Kenny up against Anthony Gordon if Kenny's fully fit.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I just think that we kind of know from how Silva operates that he's not gonna make changes that he doesn't feel are necessary. And I think, as I say, Castagna's not done a lot wrong. Yeah, he didn't have necessarily his best game against Bournemouth, but I think against Arsenal he was fine. I'd expect it to be, if Lukic is fit, he'll come back into midfield in place of Kearney.
Yeah.
Start alongside Berg. And I think the only question really then is probably who plays off the right if Wilson's a doubt. It might be Traore, as much as people will hate the very thought of that. But as I mentioned earlier, Burns playing at left back, and they might just feel like that's an avenue that we can exploit if Traore decides to use his pace to his advantage, because often he seems to do this thing where he wants the ball to feet all the time so that he can take the full back on. And sometimes you just want him to get on his bike and run so that somebody can play him in. But he seems reluctant or hesitant to do that. So that's maybe an avenue that we could look to exploit. But I think if Wilson's fit, then he probably keeps his place, because I thought he was fine last week. I thought he had a decent enough game, and it doesn't feel like we've got loads of options to be able to make wholesale changes. And Silva likes his continuity, so we'll probably just stick with those players that have done okay recently, even though we've not had the best run of results.
Do you know what? I can't. I was a big defender of Adama. And actually last season, what did he chip in? 7 assists, couple of goals. Actually should have been more assists as well. He put in some crosses that we really should have done better with during the season, I can recall. But this year he has not looked the same player. There was actually a comment on our Discord from Fulham Fan News. He said he thinks he's put on too much muscle over the summer because he just doesn't look as explosive, which is quite an interesting theory. But he just looks a bit of a liability. He's not offering really anything, and he keeps getting chances. I think for me, if Wilson isn't fit, which it doesn't look like he is, if he's not trained all week, Marco Silva's felt he had to mention that. It suggests that he's not fully fit. I think I'd be tempted to go back to the back 5. Now, whether that's Diop, Cuenca and Bassi, or whether that's Tete coming in as the third centre-back, I'm not too sure. But what you could then do is obviously play Berger and Lukic in front of the defence and then have Iwobi and King behind Raul. I could see that happening. I'd rather that personally than bring Adama in, just because I just don't think he's in any kind of form to be starting this game, even though your point on his attributes versus Dan Burns' attributes should be a win and should be successful. I've not seen any indication that Adama's on any kind of form that he would take on Dan Burn and beat him and cause problems for Newcastle. He's just not been that player this season.
Yeah, no, I take that point. I'm not massively a fan of when we play the 5 at the back, the wing back system, kind of like at Bournemouth. We had no out ball. We couldn't get out of our own half a lot of the time because we had nobody to stretch the play. So I kind of feel that as much as I don't mind the system in general, I think you need the right players to play it. And often we don't have the players that want to kind of do the attacking side of it properly. So I kind of feel that it's a bit counterproductive for us to adopt that system if we don't need to. And I just feel like here as well. So maybe it's just the vantage point of St James's Park, but it seems like a massive pitch as well. So I kind of feel like we should be looking to make the most of that and really look to stretch the play in behind if we can get that opportunity to do so.
Is it not a case though that we could keep it tight in a 5 and then make some changes later in the game?
We can keep it tight in a 4 as well. We've done that before. I don't feel
we did it last week.
I don't feel like it needs to be 5 at the back in order to keep things tight. I think especially if you've got those 2 sitting in front of the defence, it doesn't necessarily need an extra centre back in there.
Yeah, Combs just mentioned, no raking passes from Anderson either. You've kind of suggested that, Cuenca will keep his place. I guess then if he's playing alongside Diop, he'd be the guy that, I guess the progressive centre-back that brings the ball out, not necessarily by carrying the ball out, but like playing the ball out because he's so good on the ball, isn't he? He's like a midfielder at centre-back. He's got a great range of passing. Obviously not long balls like Anderson does, but just he plays sensible passes. He brings the ball forward, and he seems to be able to do that under pressure.
Yeah, I think that Anderson sort of has got those diagonal passes, but the other thing that Anderson does really well is kind of punches those balls through into midfield, which Cuenca does similarly, that Bassi and Diop don't quite do with the same sort of consistency or accuracy. So I feel like Cuenca might be useful in the game in terms of allowing us to kind of beat the pressure and play through into midfield without giving the ball away cheaply. And that's going to be key because, Newcastle are a team that are sort of high energy and like to jump on you, particularly in the early stages. So I feel like we're going to have to ride that out a bit. And hopefully, Cuenca having a good performance last week, if he keeps his place, he'll be full of confidence and be able to do that for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's been some fans that are suggesting it's time to, actually bring some of the players that we sign into the team. And obviously Chukwueze at moments injured, which is a real shame because it looked like he was just finding his way in and putting in some great performances off the bench. Others are saying it's time for Kevin to have an opportunity. You're not one of those people, are you, Mike?
Not yet, no. I don't think he's ready to start a game just yet. I think as well, Newcastle away is a risky place to kind of give somebody their first start because big ground can be a hell of an atmosphere when it gets going. Sometimes people can get swallowed up in those kind of situations, or can get a bit overhyped. And as we've talked about earlier, Kevin, has a bit of a rash element to him that maybe needs to be kind of, honed a little bit more. I think as well, the way that we're going to need to approach this game is that we're not looking to blitz it early. We're looking to probably be in the game and win it later on in it. And that's where someone like Kevin off the bench will give us real, the impetus to kind of go and get a goal if we need to, because, it's a big pitch. You'll have opportunities to run at Trippier or whoever ends up playing at right back. So I would just hold fire on that. I kind of feel that with Kevin, he's somebody that we might just need to take a little bit of time with him in terms of managing how he's fully integrated into the side. That opportunity might not come until Iwobi goes off to the African Cup of Nations in December. Or, if we lose on Saturday with looking at that Wolves game at the beginning of November and thinking we need a win here and we need a fast start, that might be the opportunity to bring him in.
Yeah,
I just think that this weekend's maybe not the one to do that in.
But possibly not. I think there'd be a different argument if Lukic was out and Iwobi was going to play centre. Let me come back to that in a moment. Just put a pin in that. But if Iwobi comes into the centre, it does present an opportunity for Kevin. And I guess the argument would be that we're struggling to create chances at the moment. Marco needs to try, some different, elements to our attack. Add some different personnel. Switch things up a bit so that we can create more chances. I hear that argument, by the way, but I think if Lukic is fit, just because of the strength of Newcastle's midfield, I think it's a no-brainer that he would come back in, and therefore Iwobi's not going to lose his place on the left. But I do think, as you say, if it's another game that we don't win or we lose, basically, and that Wolves game becomes massive, I think then there's more pressure on Marco to maybe mix things up a little bit and maybe give a player like Kevin a go, just to try and make sure that, we get those points against Wolves. Because, if we don't win on Saturday, as I said at the start of the pod, that game's going to be quite big. And I think if we lose it, 5 games in a row, I think then questions will be asked about what we're doing this season and where we're going. And definitely a lot of the fans will start panicking. So it's a bit of an interesting couple of weeks for us, I think. Obviously sandwiched in between is Wycombe away, which we are both going to on Tuesday. I'm sure we'll get to see Kevin start that one. Mike, what's gut reaction? What are you expecting from this one? I know it's a tricky one to call.
As I say, I'm not massively confident, but I don't feel like we'll get turned over. I think if we lose, it's by the odd goal. I'm going to say 1-1. I'm going to go for I think we'll get a score draw, just because we always concede, but we have got a goal in us. So yeah, that's my sort of sitting on the fence prediction.
No, you've given a prediction, so I was going to say 1-1. I think it's I just have a feeling that we could get something up there. I think they might be a little bit fatigued, a little bit distracted, and I don't think we're playing terribly. I just think if we can take our chances and keep it tight, there's an opportunity for us to go up there like we did last year and get something. I'm not saying a win, but I think there's definitely a point to be had to this in this one. So go on, I'll go 2-2 then, and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we're going to go into Marco Silva next, and actually, I was just about to talk about Marco Silva when I mentioned Iwobi earlier. One of his comments today, I think, was quite perplexing in the interview with, I suppose, the journalist, but it was reported by Jack Kelly on his X page this afternoon. Obviously, someone's posed the question about Iwobi playing in midfield. Marco's response was quite strange. He said, well, the club, the fans are thinking that, but who are they thinking? That he's going to replace Berger or he's going to replace King? And I think everyone was like, no, Marco, the other one. quite simply, if Lukic is out, clearly there's a position free that, we've seen Iwobi play in before, not least last Saturday in the second half where he played there. The position where he started when he joined the club, he was playing central midfield. He's played there last season against Brighton at home. I don't quite understand what Marco was getting at there, to suggest that was almost bonkers. There were some theories after, as I saw on our Discord, a few people had said, actually, I think Iwobi's going to start in midfield and he's just trying to put Newcastle off. Okay, maybe that's true. I just thought it was a really odd comment. What do you think of that? I know don't get too worked up about it, but it's just
pinch of salt. I think you take it with it's one of those comments that maybe he wasn't just prepped for the question and just thought it was a bit of a weird one. Sometimes managers are probably a bit like, just let me get on with it and stop questioning everything that I'm doing or not doing. It may be just a bit of giving the question short shrift. We know that Iwobi's flexible, so I think it's the kind of thing where we can trust him wherever he's put to do the job that is required of him. So I'd have no qualms about if he did move inside. I think he gives us something different to some of the players that we've got that are in there. It could just be a bluff or a double bluff, and maybe that's what's going to happen on Saturday. I don't know. I wouldn't get too digging into it too much, because I don't think it's that big a concern. It might just be something that he's looked to sort of brush it off, and was maybe thinking that if people are suggesting he should drop one of his favourites that plays through the middle, maybe that's where he was maybe trying to sort of stick up for one of those guys a bit more. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's that big a deal. We know that Silva can be a bit tetchy in his press conferences if he's not in the mood for them.
Yeah, no doubt. It sounded like he was a bit tetchy on that question. It's quite interesting because later on in the same press conference, he did mention that the midfield and the personnel, and he mentioned Sander, Lukic, Harrison, Tom Kearney, King or Smith Rowe, or like you said before, Alex Iwobi. So he acknowledged it at the end. So it was I just thought it was a strange thing to say. I don't think I think it was quite. The fans are making quite a good point that Iwobi can play there. He's quite a progressive player. We've struggled to create this season with the double pivot, and now we've got one of them injured. I think it was a pretty reasonable suggestion that Alex Iwobi could do a job in there and free up another attacking position. So I don't know. Silva obviously took offence to it.
Yeah, it's a valid option. It's definitely not one that I'd rule out. I don't think he starts with that on Saturday, though. I do feel like it sounds like Lukic is fit, so I'd expect him to come back in, and Iwobi will stay off the left.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess the point of this section of the podcast is to talk about Marco Silva, because after the game on Saturday, when Big Ange got the boot, 20 minutes after the Forest lost to Chelsea at home, there was rumours that they'd identified Marco Silva as being the ideal candidate. In fact, Peter Rutzler reported that. And when Peter says things, you have to take note. He's doesn't often speculate, Peter. He often waits until he's got firm news from the club before he reports these things. And that's always been my impression. So that was quite concerning. And there was a little period where it did look like Forest were sniffing around. I always felt that it quite far-fetched to think that Silva would leave the team that he's built mid-season. And also he's got, as has since been reported, a 15 million euro buyout clause, which sounds like a minimal in the world of players' wages and transfer fees. That's quite high for a manager's transfer fee, which is a slightly different world. And there's a lot of managers that you can bring in, like Sean Dyche, for nothing. So I was a bit concerned, but also trying to keep pragmatic about the whole situation. Obviously, fortunately, they ended up moving ahead with Sean Dyche, but I guess it just is a reminder of the fact that Silva's out of contract at the end of the season, Mike. And whereas we all think that if a big club comes in for Silva, I think the expectation of most people is he's going to take that opportunity because he's an ambitious coach, and his agent George Mendes seems committed to get him that next step. But I guess the concern is that with him out of contract and a bit frustrated this summer with how the recruitment went, a sideways step with an owner that's quite ambitious like Marinakis is could be an option for him, and you can't rule that out. So what's your thoughts on how this week's unfolded and where you're at with Marco Silva's future?
I mean, so I don't feel like him leaving this week was a viable option. I think that was Forest testing the waters to see maybe how amenable he was to it. As you say, 15 million for a manager in a PSR world where you've just got to pay off not one but two managers that you've given the chop to this season already would probably leave Forest sailing a bit too close to the wind in that regard. But they were probably just sort of seeing how feasible that was to get him out of the remainder of his contract. I'm more concerned about the summer, and I have been. I kind of feel like going into the last year of his contract, it always felt like one that was, he wasn't going to be in a rush to renew. I feel that the way that the business was conducted in the summer didn't do the club any favours in terms of retaining his services. Obviously, Shahid Khan has come out in the week and said that, we want Marco to stay. Silva is maybe, he's keeping his cards close to his chest. I feel like he's probably going to weigh up his options and see what's the best for him come the summer. I think we wouldn't have begrudged him, leaving to take a bigger club opportunity. If that was somebody like Forest, I think that would rankle with our fans a bit because obviously we came up in the same season as them. We probably feel like we should be as ambitious as maybe they are in terms of the way that they spend money. And it kind of feels a bit like it's going to come to a head, pretty soon. And the ball's in Marco Silva's court. The club will offer him a contract. I've no doubt about that. But he might just think that there's something better for him out there. I don't want him to go. I'd like him to stay. I know that there's elements of our fan base who maybe think that it's time to part ways and move on to something new.
I get it that he's not perfect. Okay, Marco's not perfect. He can be quite stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we've had issues in the past of his recruitment strategy, older players. He prefers older, experienced players. He's not notoriously been a manager that brings youth players through and gives them a chance. There's lots of little things. Nobody's perfect, and he certainly isn't. But he's also been absolutely brilliant. If you zoom out over the time he's been at Fulham, we're in the Championship when he took over. He transformed the team. We won the league. He's built us into a stable Premier League club, which we couldn't do for the previous nearly 10 years before that, he arrived. He plays good football, and actually that's important. If you look at a lot of our competitors around mid-table, they don't play as good football as us. A lot of them are quite defensive. He always is kind of on the front foot. Okay, it might be a bit predictable at times. I know it's a lot down the left and all of that, but it's attacking football. And I think the squad's gradually got better under his leadership. I think the players love him. I just think that I get there's some underlying frustrations in some of the things that he does, but I think if everyone's been really honest with themselves, it'd be a huge risk to bring someone else in. There's no guarantees in this league. Stability is really important. We could go out there and Marco could go next summer and we could bring in someone and we think, oh, he's going to bring in youth and he's going to really understand the squad, and the players might not take to him, and he might not be able to get the best out of them. It's just it's a league that stability I think is really important in, and
Agree.
For me personally, I think that the win for Fulham fans is that Marco gets the recruitment issues that he is frustrated with sorted and agreed with the Khans, and then takes on a new contract. If a condition of his new contract is right, we need more resource in recruitment, and I'm not saying necessarily more money, but more people, whatever it takes to get these deals done earlier, to make sure things happen earlier. So I've got my squad in place earlier. I can work with the players through pre-season and start. And none of this bullshit last minute shenanigans, because we can see what it's done this year. We haven't been able to integrate anyone.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a win this summer if we can convince the club can kind of bend to that rule. I think everyone would win.
No, I agree. Look, stability isn't sexy, but it's definitely necessary in terms of like building and becoming successful. I think as well, the thing that concerns me is, and I know some of this is going back over a decade, but the Khans don't have a good track record of appointing managers. We've appointed 2 good managers, I think, in the whole time that they've been, the owners. So that would concern me. That there was talk about, if Marco Silva had decided to go to Forest, there was no backup plan. That astounds me. Like, how do a Premier League football club not have a short list of 3, 4, 5 managers that if the manager was to resign tomorrow, they would go and approach? Like, that should just be standard for any seriously operating football club, let alone at the level that we're at the moment. So that concerns me. Obviously, the best case scenario is that we get Silva tied down to a new contract. He gets the transfer business done in a manner that he wants it done, so that we can operate to the level that we're trying to achieve, rather than chasing our tail, waiting weeks to try and squeeze $1 million here or $1 million there, and then just get done on it anyway by paying what the club wanted 2 months earlier. That just felt like a bit of a waste of how we were, operating, and missing out on some other targets because of that. So, that I think what you say is the kind of the ideal scenario, as much as there is a small appetite for something different. I feel that
that's just boredom. Boredom.
I feel that the common consensus would be, we'd all be happy if he signed a new contract and stayed, because
I think so.
It feels like we're in a good place at the moment, which wind back 10 years, and see that we were languishing at the bottom of the Championship. Ross McCormack being at the game the other day was actually a nice reminder of how shit we were.
Yeah,
and that guy saved us from being a League One football club. So
certainly did.
So I think those who are not on the Marco Silva train, or who have jumped off, be careful what you wish for, guys, because it could go badly wrong again, and we could have Felix Magath putting cheese on the legs of footballers to heal their injuries, which is what I should do for my ankle injury as we speak.
Yeah, all good, very good points. Right, Mike, in the interest of time, I'm going to run through some questions that we got raised on the Discord, and I think we'll try and answer them quickly, because we like to keep the show around an hour. We're already approaching that at the moment. So I'll just go quickly to a question actually raised by one of our own, Fulham Boston's Mike Levy. He was mentioning about Cuenca, how well he played on Saturday, and he said, in the summer, if we were to sell one, that's, I think the theory being, maybe we have to sell someone for PSR or whatever bullshit rules they have in next summer. Who would it be? Would it be Bassi, who could be a higher fee, or would it be Cuenca? Is Bassi too important? Do we keep Cuenca? I just get your quick view on that one.
I mean, I don't feel like we sell either of them if we don't have to.
No, agreed.
That might be dictated by the player themselves. If one isn't playing and wants to move, or if there is interest from other clubs and they are particularly keen, then that could happen, and it's sort of beyond our control. But we touched on earlier, the squad depth, having 2 good players for every position, is key to us being able to achieve what we want to. So I wouldn't be letting either of those two go, because different in profile, but similar quality levels. So, happy with competition for places to be at the highest possible caliber. So keep both of them would be my argument, if we can.
Yeah, definitely. I guess if you had to lose one, quick answer.
I like Bassey, so I'd probably want to keep Bassey. I feel like he's somebody who maybe we'd be able to get more money for in the long term. But I'd like to keep Bassey.
Okay, fair enough. Question from Spanish FFC Ultras, and he said, under Silva, we are predictable. Everything comes through from the wings. We need Alex in the centre and wingers to play off him. Which a bit more, it's more of a statement than a question. But what do you feel about that? Do you think that it is becoming a little bit predictable? I know we've touched on it already. I guess that's why we've brought in players like Kevin and Chukwueze, and once they're up to speed, you would expect them to do more.
I think what we're looking for in terms of it, predictable is not necessarily the worst thing, because a lot of the top sides are predictable. Arsenal are predictable. We know what they're going to do. It's stopping it is the problem. And I feel like it's a quality thing that we maybe aren't consistent enough in our quality to be able to do what we want to do. So yeah, a bit of variation, maybe attacking more down the right would be, to kind of mix things up. But I feel like maybe taking on shots from range might be something would be more useful. Or we've looked to bring in someone like Kevin, who's got a bit of stardust about him, hopefully, that can unlock.
Well, and Chukwueze,
and Chukwueze, yeah. But I just feel like it's not a predictability thing that is the problem. It's maybe a quality and consistency thing that can sometimes be, I
think what he was basically saying is like our tactics are a little bit predictable, and teams might have worked that out a little bit, I think is what he's kind of suggesting. But yeah, I think that, Kevin and Chukwueze, when we start to integrate them into the team, I think that should offer us a bit more unpredictability. And yet, as he says, Iwobi might get an opportunity in the midfield, just not instead of King or Berger, as Marco thought we were all talking about earlier. His second question was, if we fail to get a striker and a number 8 in January, do we assume Marco is off? My immediate reaction is January is a really hard window, and no doubt we'll try and address some positions, but I wouldn't necessarily assume that if that is the case, that's a sign that Marco's leaving.
Personally. Yeah, I don't think it all hinges on that, but I think if that's what Silva wants and doesn't get,
that's a good point.
It doesn't bode well. But if he's more realistic about it, and maybe, as you say, it not being a window where we can get value for money, then, but there's promises of maybe in the summer. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. We do need that number 8. Apparently, we are trying to get a deal done. That's what I've heard on the grapevine, for a midfielder. Thank God. So that would be fantastic news if we can address that area. But we won't get into that. And then last question from Jimmy, and he said, crazy question. But if we lose against Newcastle and lose against Wolves, he's ever the optimist, Jimmy. That'll be 5 losses in a row in the Premier League. Does that mean Marco should get the sack? Normally 5 losses is the chopping block.
We're not West Ham and Forest and some of these other kamikaze clubs. I'd like to think that, we'd be a bit more level-headed than that. But I don't see it. I think things would have to go a lot worse than a couple more defeats for us to sack Silva, especially because, as I mentioned earlier, we seem to have no contingency plan as to who we would bring in. So
we were just talking about, the club have said they want to keep him. So we're talking. He's not under any pressure at the moment. Obviously, it would be really, really disappointing, and quite a lot. I think alarm bells would be ringing to an extent if we lose the next 2, and particularly the Wolves at home game. But I wouldn't think that would mean Marco's under pressure, and I'd still trust him to find a way out of it.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of thing where if we sacked the manager at what had been the first sort of point of not even crisis, just a down period in his entire tenure, that would just be madness from the club. So I feel like he has got enough credit in the bank to ride out any sort of storms that are coming our way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's a wrap. I think we'll wrap it up there. So yeah, it's been good to catch up with you, Mike, and discuss Newcastle. I hope you guys will have a safe trip up there. How are you getting up there, by the way? It's no trains, is there?
I'm flying. Well, I'm not flying. I'm getting on a flight. So yeah, bit of a random one to get to a domestic game, but yeah.
Out to Claire Green here. Just said she's at the Dorking match watching Townsend, and she's on the bench. What are they thinking? But they're actually winning. So okay, well, we'll hopefully we'll get Mary back on next week, and she can tell us a bit more about that one. But well done for tuning in while you're at the Dorking game. Thanks for doing that. So yeah, look, let's hope that this Saturday we can put an end to this losing run and get a point. Cheer Jimmy up, keep Marco in the job, and then we can always. I think that would take a bit of the pressure off ahead of Wolves, which obviously, regardless, is going to be a must-win game. Thanks to everyone for joining us on YouTube, on X, and on Facebook. And I'm sure we'll be back for a post-game review after Newcastle on Sunday or Monday, if no one can be bothered on Sunday. Thanks again. Thanks to you, Mike. And to everyone, come on, you Whites. You Whites.